So we would do a 1-minute sketch of what would a new policy look like, feel like for the various actors involved, the agency, the frontline worker, the citizen, perhaps the trade union's representative of the business and so on, and then role-playing it and video filming that to capture the service. So that is really what designing services can be about, is really making it very visual and concrete. Next, please. Also be making it so concrete that you're actually role-playing it for real. These are young Danish citizens, actually they're design students we've engaged to role-play new solutions to climate change, which is also the project I mentioned. And so we've tried it with public servants too. It can be a little bit tougher getting public servants. They can be convinced to do the video sketches, but to role-play full scale, that's a bit more tough, but it can be done. And it's a way of rehearsing the future, trying out for yourself what it might look like in the future. Next slide, please. Service journey, you've probably heard about this already, but service journey mapping is a way of doing it. It's a way of visualizing the pathway of the citizen through the system and all the different interactions. In this case, these are the points of pain in terms of experience that is experienced by a Danish injured worker. And the green flashes are places where the system makes no sense to her and where she's really confused and frustrated. And as you can see, she receives about 25 letters from the agency along the way. So it's not that she's not informed. Problem is she's probably over-informed, and it doesn't make sense with all this technical lingo about how sick is she, and doctor's statements and insurance statements and so on. So this is a way of visualizing it as a driver of common understanding, for example, when various public servants need to work together around it. Next, please. Finally, you can visualize the system, again, with a citizen in the system, but really mapping system resources. In this case, also, this is our injured worker, a private clinic, doctors, hospitals, trade union, the agency, the businesses, and so on. So you can really just start mapping what kind of resources are there out there that can be part of really co-producing a new service scenario. And just getting that overview of the system level and then being able to start thinking about redesigning it is really, really critical. Now, it's important to me to say that using design as a driver in innovation in government is not something that we're just doing at MindLab. In Australia, the Australian Centre for Social Innovation is using design approaches in its efforts down in Adelaide in South Australia. In Helsinki, the Helsinki Design Lab is working with government officials to bring design and strategic design, as they call it, into government. And we're seeing an organization in France called the 27th Region work with the French regions to redesign regional policies. So, and then of course in the UK we have a number of both consultancies and not-for-profits that are working with design approaches to helping craft new government services. So we're seeing design, it's not something that is just sort of novel in Denmark, but we're seeing it grow as a discipline and being applied in new ways in social services and in policy. So I think what you're seeing here is just maybe the beginning of design being taken in as a major approach or tool in crafting policies. Now I'm almost done. Just the next slide, please. You of course have you may have your critical questions, and one critical question could be about this managing expectations of involvement in the design process. And as you can see here, my point would be that the reason we involve citizens, like the students you saw earlier, is to involve them as experts in what they are really, truly experts in, which is their own lives. And that's the key point of the sort of co-design or co-creative approach in the process. Most people understand that they're not in the process to make decisions, they're in the process to help qualify decisions that are then made by others. And that's a key point in the type of engagement I'm talking about here. Next slide, please. So 3 principles that I try to sum up what this co-creation approach is really about. And simply said, it's about going extremely close up and being very concrete to get insight. It's about zooming far out to the system level to understand what resources can be leveraged to create better outcomes. It's about really shifting from thinking about service delivery to shifting to thinking about what are the entire set of resources, citizen resources, businesses, and others in society that can help create better outcomes. Next slide, please. So, concluding, the management challenge is, as one manager we interviewed around some of our projects, is that these insights about how citizens experience services can be very powerful and can be also accepted in organizations. But as I think was also mentioned in the previous presentation, the tough part is really taking that organizational consequence and changing systems and processes and behavior and attitudes within the system to then accommodate the insights and the new solutions that we've gained. And that's the tough part, and that's what, in this case, the head of division in the Danish tax ministry is telling us. That's the tough bit, and that's really a change leadership or change management task. Now finally, next slide. If you want to read more, there's this book out last year that might have a few pointers. It's basically titled Co-Creation, and it has a lot of more detail about some of this. And then finally, you can read more on our website, next slide, at MindLab, or follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Christian, from this side of the world, thank you so much. You've really hit the theme of what have we been doing, what's exciting, and are we there yet? It's time for questions, so who'd like to ask a question? And I have one just to kick it going, Christian, if you would. Tell me about the organic growth of MindLab. It does sound very much like a lab. And these relationships with the Ministry of Economic and Business Affairs, Taxation, and the Ministry of Employment, how did you get this going? At what level was this sponsored? And is this really just the tip of the iceberg?
So I think we're seeing a spread of the practices we're using across various countries, but also certainly in Denmark. For example, the Danish Ministry of Taxation has, after working with us for the last 5 years, established their own decentral unit that is building on the same kind of design-driven methods. The story of MindLab is that MindLab has existed for 10 years, originally only part of the business ministry, and sponsored really by the senior executive, by the permanent secretary at that time. When I came in 5 years ago, we redesigned MindLab, we expanded it, we added a research dimension, we have PhD research projects, 4 of them going on right now, and we embedded MindLab really in the top management. So on our board, we have the 3 permanent secretaries of those 3 departments. And I think what's happened is that we've seen MindLab shift from being more about the lab idea and about innovation as creativity, the physical space as the driver of creativity, now to a much more citizen-centric, much more research-oriented, and much more cross-cutting, both across those 3 departments that have a lot of common policy challenges around, for example, administrative burdens, but certainly also engaging a lot of others, and also with local municipalities, for example, when it makes sense to involve them. So there's been an organic growth, and there's actually a nice article in the Monocle magazine, which is online on our website, about a bit of the story of MindLab.
Okay, we've got a first question from Rolf Alter, who is one of our keynote speakers tomorrow, who's Director of Public Governance at the OECD. Rolf.
Yes. Christian, I really admire you from Albuquerque to this part of the world. Fantastic. That's innovation, I would call it.
Admire Cisco.
Absolutely. Christian, very interesting examples and a great approach. Could you comment on what do you think could be the impact of the fact that government in Denmark is a quantity and an actor that is respected and is trusted, generally speaking? I mean, if you think about it, your fellow citizens pay 56% on average taxes. Yeah. Huh? So there must be something behind it that says government is a good place to be. It does probably good things, but probably also we can improve it. So in that sense, what is your view on that kind of a positive environment in which you operate with your MindLab?
Yeah, no, that's of course a very good point. You could make the counter argument that then a MindLab wouldn't really be needed so much in a country like Denmark, because obviously government must be doing something right. But a MindLab type effort or those kind of practices are much more needed in countries with a lower level of trust and a higher power distance between citizens and government. I think you and I actually were going to be on a panel together in Paris in mid-September which I look very much forward to. And in that case, we can maybe have the conversation about whether this would be possible to do in a French context. But I do believe, actually, as I mentioned, there are people in France, for instance, and also in people in developing countries too, with very different cultures of government that are applying some of these principles of design-led efforts, sometimes on the outskirts of government, sometimes more run by not-for-profits or non-governmental organizations. But I certainly think it can be done as terms of an approach in many places. I think we at MindLab are very lucky to have high trust within government also, to trust someone like us to be a part of government and to do what we're doing, because it's essentially challenging the system. We're trying to help, change from within, but it can also be certainly conceived not as a help, but as a challenge. One final point is that when we interview citizens, also in Denmark, they often tell us, wow, that's the first time a government official has really been concerned with my needs, and I'm amazed that somebody's actually doing this kind of work. So even in Denmark, I think that there's a need for this, and there's a huge potential to do more of it.
Now, a question from that gentleman. If you just let me know, I'll get a microphone to you if you do have a question, so we can speed the process up. Gentleman over there. But firstly, you, sir, yes.
Don Munro from the Department of Premier and Cabinet in New South Wales. Thank you for your talk. The New South Wales Department of Health has been doing something like this for 3 or 4 years at least, in terms of having patient involvement in the redesign of health services. One of their important lessons, though, was to also involve the nurses, the doctors, the administrators, the cleaners and so on, because unless there was that employee involvement, there was a great problem in implementation, and also they were often a very good source of ideas. Could you give some comments about your involvement, or how you involve employees as well as the customers or the patients? Yes. Or whatever?
So that's an excellent point. And actually the reason I speak about co-creation so much and not about just citizen-centric innovation is that we've really seen some various paradigms of innovation. One paradigm is sort of the user-driven or the citizen-centric or customer-centric, and the other has really been about the internal employee-driven innovation. There's also a methodology actually that's been coined, at least in Denmark. And now I think we need to do both. And that's why I think co-creation as an approach which is about creating with people, and people can both be the end users, the patients in your case, in the hospital sector, for example, but certainly also the nurses, the doctors, even the porters and so on, because they have very, very important insight and experience to add, but certainly also because they have to own the results. And so at MindLab, we're not the ones coming up with the solutions. We are facilitating solutions that are designed and created, and the ideas are coming from the public servants, our colleagues, who are line officials or frontline workers and so on. We're providing a platform and the insight and knowledge. We also bring them with us into the field. When you saw the picture of the photo of the young dentist who didn't really understand the online tax services, we took a developer from the tax ministry with us to sit on his lap really and experience for himself why it was that a young Danish digitally literate citizen couldn't use the systems they designed. So I think it's certainly both, and the more we work with this at MindLab, the more we speak about, it sounds almost like a disease, but we call it a double-sided ethnography. You actually have to do both ethnography among citizens or end users, but you also have to do ethnography or cultural research within the organization to understand what are the levers of change and how might you get those employees and the staff involved in the process. The last quote I had in my presentation was really addressing that issue, saying that the tough bit is about the organizational consequences of this kind of insight. So I very much agree with your point, and it's not either or, it's both and.
Christian, we might speed up the answers if you wouldn't mind, because we've got a bundle of questions. That gentleman there first, then a lady at the back here, and there's a gentleman there. So yes, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Peter. Martin Stewart-Weeks from Cisco. I just want to thank my colleagues at Cisco for not only putting the link up, but just doing that really nice bit in the middle where they took the link down again just momentarily to give us all a bit of a heart attack and just show how easy it is to get it back up again. But engineers do like to do these things to you, so thanks for that. Very quick question. MindLab, it seems to me, is both particularly powerful because of the way it creates a special and very intense environment for this kind of stuff, and that could be its big weakness, which is how does it get out of the lab and infect more broadly? the work, the rhythms and the changes across the public sector, and doesn't just stay essentially in this rather nice and very cool kind of ghetto that you built there, in typical Danish style,